Shakespeare's first folio, the handwritten draft of The Handmaid's Tale, an oddly shaped Alice in Wonderland book, an erotic Alice in Wonderland book, super tiny, super sized, and a few thousand-year-old legal deed.
There's no other copy of the first draft of The Handmaid's Tale anywhere in the world except in our library.
The Thomas Fisher Rare Book Library in Toronto is said to house well over 700,000 volumes, but you won't find the bulk of the books in the stacks on display, but instead, they're hidden away in the basement. So I met up with the Fisher's Outreach Librarian, who gave us a glimpse into this restricted space.
It's the largest in Canada by a considerable margin too. I mean, almost every university across Canada will have a rare books and special collections department, but we are by far the largest one in Canada.
The library's collection extends well into the past, housing some very old materials, including a tablet that is almost 4,000 years old.
So it's a legal deed. Yeah, it's a deed of sale for 2 derelict houses, 1789 BCE. And weird enough, it's actually next to one of our other most important collections, which are Alice in Wonderland collection. So it starts here, goes all the way down, pretty much to the very end.
As John explains, Alice in Wonderland went out of copyright fairly early, so many illustrators got their hands on the text and wanted to make their own version.
Yeah, this was done by a book artist out in Newfoundland who died. It's really cool. Yeah, so you can look down here and read the entire text.
But as unusual as this pull-out Alice book is, it is perhaps not the most surprising book in this collection. There's also an erotic Alice copy from France.
So this is something that obviously most people didn't think we'd have in the Alice in Wonderland collection. With proof that Joseph Brabant collected almost everything.
While you may not have seen this erotic Alice book before, you may recognize one of the Fisher's most prized books, the first folio of Shakespeare. While the true value of this book lies in its historical significance, to give you an idea of what its monetary value is, a copy of the first folio sold at auction in 2020 for just under $10 million US.
It's the first time so many of these plays have been caught or in book form. 1623.
The collection of old notable books also includes what is believed to be the oldest printed English language book in Canada, which consists of treatises on friendship, old age, and nobility, and dates to 1481.
You know, you don't want to have a reputation of only collecting dead white men material. So this is why we do collect, for example, queer material is one of our areas of strength. We're trying to increase our BIPOC collections, essentially. That's an important part of our mandate going forward.
And the majority of the Fisher's ever-growing collection is actually buried underground.
In terms of the total material we have here, we're talking about almost 800,000 books at this point. And 4,000 linear meters of manuscript material. So in some ways, everything in this library is kind of hidden because nobody's allowed inside the stacks unless you're staff. So no patrons, researchers, or etc. are allowed to get the books themselves. But on the other hand, nothing is hidden because basically almost anything in this library is accessible, with maybe about half dozen pieces that are that you do really need to demonstrate academic need. Pretty much everything here is accessible to the general public. Anybody with curiosity can come into our library and look at our materials. So, and we do have a lot of people just coming in that say want to look at Leonard Cohen's handwriting. Leonard Cohen's small notebooks. Yeah, so these are just these tiny notebooks that he was writing on back in the late 50s, early 60s. I think these are the bee's knees.
The amount of archival boxes and manuscripts contained within seems endless, with almost all of it completely accessible.
Anything with a red dot, for example, is under restriction. So you would probably need the permission of the donor themselves to access that material. So here's Margaret Atwood, obviously is one of our most important archival collections. She donates her materials every year. We first started collecting her material back in 1970, so it's a very large collection. If you wanted to look at, say, the first draft of The Handmaid's Tale, there's no other copy of the first draft of The Handmaid's Tale anywhere in the world except at our library. So if you wanted to understand Margaret Atwood's creative process when she's writing her books, you need to come to this library to look at all the drafts, to look at all the research materials.
So what does Atwood's creative process look like?
Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. You know, it's not that it's fragile, but we just want to make sure that it stays intact. So the original handwritten draft, recognize the opening. You know, a desk, a chair, a table, a lamp, a window.
A chair, a table, a lamp.
So all the drafts of The Handmaid's Tale are in this box.
Well, there's so much material contained here, including the Banting scrapbooks related to the discovery of insulin. It really is just a drop in the bucket in terms of the total collection. So we head up one level to the upper basement where most of the books are housed.
So the way we catalog our books in the general collections is actually by size. So because what you don't want is a book that's, say, this big next to a small book, because a small book might get lost. We're not like a traditional library, so we don't use Library of Congress. So if you went to Robarts Library next door, for example, and you were in the psychology section, you know, one book next to another book would be related somewhat, because that's how the books are cataloged in Library of Congress or in Dewey, any of those systems. We have our own classification system. So, as I said, we do them by size. But we start at B, C's a little wider, D's again a little taller, E's a little taller from that, F, etc., until we get to some of the ones that are the G's and the F's that have to be laid flat.
As we head through this underground labyrinth, it is tempting to just stop and examine some of the collection.
You know, if you're interested in Canadian machinery from 1905, you have to come to the Fisher to see that.
But there's just so much to be seen that the books even spill over into Robarts Library next door.
Yeah, so once we pass this door, we're now under Robarts Library. And this is actually, truth be told, where the bulk of the material is actually held, because this is what they call compact shelving. Yeah, a lot of this stuff is still to be processed as well. We'll walk around this way. So as you can see, this you've got a lot of books down in this area. The dolls that never were mine. We do put book plates on on the material as well. If we misshelve something, we may never find it. And unfortunately, we won't know it's been misshelved until someone requests it, and it's not on the shelf, and then sort of panic can ensue. So again, more stacks. So the Canlets down here. Our Marshall McLuhan library is down here. So people come to the library and they think that, oh, it's a rare book library, so all the material must be old. That's not true. Rare books and special collections take sort of, we take and encompass all types of things. It's really kind of cool. We have a fairly large collection of queer-related material, which again is heavily accessed as well.
You could easily spend a lifetime down here exploring the different books and not even make a dent. And not only is almost all of the material available to view, but there is also a scanner to capture some of the rare books in digital form should you want to continue your research outside the library. Although it's hard to imagine a better atmosphere than here to do so. The Fisher also has a preservation lab and a conservator for working on the collection. But just because a book may appear that it's falling apart does not necessarily mean that work should be done on it.
For example, is knotted. This binding's pretty much in terrible shape. But we don't want to fix the binding, because as soon as you start fixing things and altering things, it takes you one step away from the original book itself. Tie the book up, and always do it at the top.
Then there are some books that are just sturdier.
This is the binding. It's like solid wood. So we also get people to lift it up because it's very, very very heavy. So let's take a look at the paper, which is vellum. Vellum is essentially a paper made from animal skin. Vellum itself refers to veal. This is an antiphonal, so essentially music for voices.
The expansive collection of rare books and manuscripts housed here lends the Fisher to feeling more akin to a museum than a library. But unlike a museum, almost everything is available for the public to place their hands on. And as John puts it, something that's stuck in a box that is never used, in some ways, it doesn't exist. For Narcity, I'm Lance McMillan. Thank you so much for watching, and please be sure to like and subscribe to see more content like this.